Hello, and welcome to episode number 334 of the Board Game Barrage podcast. I am your host, Kellen, the Red Tank, and I'm joined by Mark and Neelan. Say something.
Hey.
Hello.
I used this microphone in a couple of work meetings, and my boss was like, no, Kellen, you're doing a voice, right? Like, he was thinking that the change in tenor of my voice, and I was like, no, sir. I spent inordinate amounts of podcast money to make my nasally voice sound better with this ridiculous microphone. And many people don't know I'm actually still on a better microphone than the two of you. I don't know what that says about all of us.
That says
together.
I don't need it.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
My voice
yeah.
is
The dulcet. Yeah, the tones.
The mic isn't even plugged in. It's just a problem.
You know, all I need is one of those like emptied out coffee cans and a string, and it works.
Yeah. I do see a pop filter, bro, on your mic, which I don't see on anyone else's. So I don't know if you're projecting on your plosives there, bro. All right, today on episode 334 of the show, we're going to be talking about the games we've played, and then we're going to get to our featured topic, which is, has anything done it better since? And if you're wondering what that means, we all are, but Neelan said it. Has anything done it better since Crocodile Dundee 3?
Yeah. Peak cinema.
But before we do that, we're talking about the games we played. Neelan is going to talk to us about box number 2 by Neil Patrick Harris, actor,
famous
board
game designer. Yeah,
board game designer. I will be talking to us about the latest hotness, Catan, Cities and Knights. This is not a joke. And Mark will talk to us about An Infamous Traffic, which I will say, An Infamous Traffic might be the best named board game of all time.
You don't think box number 2 is?
Well, not a lot of competition in these three games, but I legitimately think that from like an evocative standpoint, there's not been a board game title where I'm just like, I could see a movie. This could be an amazing movie poster. Like, it's just like, I'm into it.
I don't know if it's just because we were just talking about the bonus, but anytime anyone says Infamous Traffic, I do think There Will Be Blood just pops into my head a little bit.
Sure.
Like there is there's some sort of like similarity in those titles to me.
Definitely. So, Neelan.
Yeah.
You were playing with yourself, and it's called Box 2.
Uh-huh.
Talk to us about it.
Yeah,
Neil Patrick Harris.
With Neil Patrick Harris. Yeah, I wasn't alone. Neil Patrick Harris was with me watching the whole time. The thing that's really hard to know about... What's hard to know about Box 2's like credentials is like, you know, it's claimed to be designed by Neil Patrick Harris. He's credited as the designer in Board Game Geek. I'm pretty sure he's not the designer. I'm pretty sure he's just someone that they roped in to publicize the game. But this is created by Theory 11, who do a whole mix of different like cards.
Wait, what is it made by someone else but designed by him?
Well,
what is that?
Theory 11 is like the publishing company, the production company. I'm pretty sure it's like their internal design
by
team.
Theory 11.
Yeah. So I don't really know exactly anything that I'm talking about, but it is ostensibly created by Neil Patrick Harris. I spoke about Box 1 on a previous episode, which I described, and I think this is going to be relevant because just let me know when you see the butt coming. Box 1 was excellent. I thought it was a really, I would recommend it as a escape room in a box style puzzle game. It does a lot with gimmicks and props, a lot of stuff that you're kind of manipulating. And this is kind of why I would say right off the bat, I wouldn't necessarily recommend these for like more than one person. It's just a lot of stuff you need to be handling. You can't really share the puzzle with someone else because you're trying to manipulate an object and kind of figure out its secrets. Like all these little props have like little puzzle components, almost like puzzle boxy type things, little surprises where it's like very cleverly produced and made that it is just, there's a very intense charm to all of it. And I was very happily surprised by all of Box 1. Box 2, by comparison, I thought was mostly miserable, which is kind of surprising. I was mostly expecting it to just be like the same or just like slightly worse, but it is kind of wild to me. And maybe I don't even genuinely know if I'm in the minority on this, but like I thought it was pretty bad. Some of this is going to be hard to talk about in specifics without obviously spoiling puzzles and things like that. But the things I will say that are quite bizarre to me. Well, this is a little bit silly because like this was just very specific to my box. My box had a pretty severe misprint or misproduction or production flaw where I literally couldn't open it. And I thought that was part of the puzzle. So I spent like half an hour trying. I'm not even kidding.
Thinking it was like this amazing meta puzzle of opening the box.
Exactly. Because of the way it's engineered, there are little tabs you can kind of like slide around. I had thought it was literally like a puzzle box. And I thought, oh, this is cute. And then half an hour later, I'm still fiddling with it, being like, I'm just missing something here. And it just turned like it was just completely misprinted. Like the lid is just supposed to lift off and it's supposed to be. Anyway, so off to a bad start there. The biggest thing I would say that the biggest flaw that this leans into is it really embraces a app or web-based kind of philosophy that is just implemented really badly. From the very beginning and sort of also in different ways throughout the rest of it, you're interfacing with I'm not going to say AI, that would be giving it too much credit, but like a virtual person that's supposed to be like a character you're interacting with, right, throughout the thing. But
you have a friend.
Exactly. I wasn't doing this alone. I had a friend solving it with me.
Was that Neil?
That
Neil.
Yeah, that's exactly. But the implementation of that was so bad to the point that it was just literally, it's barely reacting to what you're saying so much as you say something and then it pumps out the next line of dialogue. And you say something, it pumps out the next. So here's the example. I took a screenshot of this because this was spectacular. And like, I'm not going to say the specific word, which is the answer to this, but I'll just substitute it with sunflower in this case.
Okay.
But like, there's a line with a person I'm interacting with who is Steven from New York, apparently, says, does what you're seeing match mine at all? And I say, sunflower. Are your lines straight, wavy, or kind of curved or swirly? Sunflower. So there's clearly a full image there. Sunflower. Got it. So what do you think the drawing is? Sunflower. It's like, that's like how inane this was. You're just trying to get it to like get there, you know? And this is throughout the entire thing. And the thing that's frustrating about that, it's holding your hand at every step, making sure that you're getting there to like such an absurd degree that it was actually insulting through the entire process of it. A lot of the little gimmicks kind of felt I kind of knew what they wanted me to do with them immediately, but you're still going through the rigmarole of interacting with the app and didn't have as many strong payoffs as I thought from the first box. So all in all, just a huge disappointment. A lot of the stuff that could have been clever was frustrating to interact with or straight up just didn't work the way it was intended to. And I just don't remember having that experience with box one at all. So pretty miserable all around. Can't recommend it, but if at anything, if this is a reminder to like try box one, if you like this type of escape room puzzle game, I would still recommend that.
I think, Neil, and you're in the exact... Box 1 has a 7.7 on BGG, and Box 2 has a 5.9.
Okay, yeah, well, there we go.
So it's almost like they phoned it in, though the box does look quite a bit snazzier looking than the Box 1 box for just the front cover.
They're both pretty good. Yeah, it's hard to remember exactly specifically, but like it's like it is production values like you've not seen in most games for both of them, I should say. But
can you repack it, or is it like
you can technically? It's one of those things where like it depends on how much you grub up and break stuff in the process. I did not feel like it was going to make a very compelling box for me to repackage either one of these in my memory. So yeah,
because I would think if Box 1, if you could have repackaged it, I'll bet you would have and given it to either me or someone else.
Oh, absolutely. No, totally. I certainly, if memory serves, I threw it away, and I wouldn't have done that unless it was the only option.
That was the option. Yeah.
This is so frustrating and I guess timed, because I played Box 1 and liked it, and Roselle was actually looking for a game that was like an escape room game, and one of the games that she actually ended up buying based on me liking Box 1 is Box 2.
That's a bummer.
So we have it, and she's been like waiting for a special time to play it. Now it's gonna be awful. So that's funny.
Yeah, it's hard. Like, look, I think that I at this point be hesitant to say like you might still have a good time with it.
Yeah, no,
but
it seems
like, you know,
it seems pretty bad.
It's rough. It's rough.
That's all right.
But yeah, that is Box 2 by Theory 11 and possibly Neil Patrick Harris.
Okay, so since the very beginning of this podcast, one of the board games I have often brought up but never played is Catan, Cities and Knights. Now, Catan, the Eurogame progenitor of all Eurogame progenitors, I played it a lot back in the day. And I was always told, Cities and Knights, bro. Cities and Knights is the more attacky, confrontational Catan game. And I always thought, well, I would like that. For whatever reason, I never played it. I've played Seafarers. I've played a 5 and 6 player game. I've played the game with the cards instead of the dice. And so when I saw that Asmodee, is it Asmodee? Or is it actually, they have their own company, Catan? like is its own company. I don't know.
It's its own company, but I always thought it was like an offshoot of Asmodee, or at least Asmodee owns them now. I'm not sure.
Yeah. There is a new 6th edition of Catan, and we were able to get a review copy of both the base game and Cities and Knights for the fateful game of Cities and Knights Catan that I have wanted to play for over 10 years. Neelan, you have played Catan once as a 2-player count, which I don't think even counts for a game about trading and sort of building. So this was, in a way, your real first game of Catan, and we jumped right into Cities and Knights.
Yeah, it's kind of been a weird journey with it. 'Cause I had played it once before a long time ago. Don't really remember anything about that. But the one time in recent memory that I played it was this 2-player game where obviously your trading options, I don't even remember how, it was a house rule that made it a 2-player game, to be clear. And I don't know how your trading options worked. And that kind of, I think, set me up for this whole idea that, like, okay, no, Catan needs to be played with more players, like, to, you know, experience the real thing. I was maybe a little bit surprised by how underwhelmed is not the right word, but trading wasn't as, like, huge a component of it as I'd maybe been led to believe. We were doing some of that, and it was sort of generally, you know, it had, like, a cool vibe to it, where it's like, okay, if you want to get ahead efficiently, what can I give away to another player to get the resources I need to build the stuff I need, right? But, like, I kind of felt like you could spend a huge chunk of that game not trading and still do okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that it helps the feeling of getting screwed by the dice, which is like,
Sure.
okay, I'm going to trade with my one neighbor and not the other one, and we're going to help each other out, and we're kind of in this together, and just a little more options. But it helps with the feeling, which I think the game is designed to give you, which is that, like, man, if I just had one more sheep, I could really do the things that I want to do on this turn.
Yeah, that makes sense. And maybe it's because, like, in a 3-player game, that's just naturally reduced. Maybe that would be better at 4, but I'm not sure.
I agree. And also trading gets more... Once people know the relative value of things, I think trading happens more, not less, because people just don't want to get swindled in their first play. Irregardless, these new additions, I don't know the differences to sort of espouse, like, between... I don't think there's any rule changes. I will say that the box art, I find to be, like, stunning, like simply like stunning. They're doing this sort of flat gradient thing with the color, and I love it. I'm like happy to have these on the shelf, which is not something I expected to say based on seeing the art online, but like seeing it in person, there's something about the flat color gradients that just does it for me. Don't know how to describe it. The last time I had Catan, there were still settling, right? Okay. Which we're not doing anymore, I guess. So I did want to talk mostly about Cities and Knights. I think that Cities and Knights adds a couple things. Mark, have you played Cities and Knights, Catan?
I have not.
Okay. You've played Catan, though.
I've played Catan, yes.
Yeah. So Cities and Knights adds a tech tree, sort of. It adds like 3 tech tracks that you can go up on that are sort of trade, politics, and one other one like science. And there are special abilities that you get if you get high enough on these tracks. It adds additional commodities. So instead of just wood, if you have a city on a place, you can acquire paper. And that paper is what you're using to go up the science track. It kills the development cards in favor of these sort of progress cards that it actually ties to the dice, where it's like, based on how high you are on a track, when each person rolls for resources, if the science die shows up, you're going to get it if it's 1 to 2, 1 to 4, 1 to 6. So there's a little bit of luck involved in whether you'll get to acquire these cards. In addition to that, Cities and Knights, and so that is sort of the funniest moment of the whole night, Mark, was Neelan saying, so what's in base Catan and what's in, Cities and Knights? And then he's like, obviously the Cities and Knights are both new for this version of Catan. And I was like, actually wrong. There are cities and knights in base Catan. It was just like the funniest.
Yeah.
He was like sort of like bashfully going, I'm an idiot. I of course the cities and knights are what's new, but like in fact, both cities and knights exist in base Catan.
Right.
Yeah, I think it was just something like, are these new? Oh, wait, no, sorry. That's a stupid question. And then and you have to ask it anyway.
I don't know. It's just something about the title being so like specific and then us having a little moment about it. I found hilarious. In addition to that, it adds knights. It adds a different kind of knights. Knights in the base game are cards. Knights in this are on the board, and they're sort of blocking routes. They're helping you repel the robber, and they're also fighting against the barbarians who are slowly coming towards the board. There's also, for what it's worth, Neon, the third big expansion, I think, is Traders and Barbarians, which is funny because I don't know even what's in that.
That adds the trading and the barbarians. Presumably.
Yeah, exactly. So things that are already, again, in this game. The main thrust of the barbarians is like, if you all aren't collectively raising enough knights, then someone loses a city. And the person who loses a city is the player who contributed the least. And then if you successfully repel the barbarians, whoever contributed the most gets a victory point towards the end of game victory condition. So this was similar, in some ways to games that have come after, like Lowlands or even Archipelago, where you are having to sort of kind of collectively do something, but then who gets hurt is sort of targeted, or who gets helped is targeted. So there is some cajoling and jockeying to be like, okay, guys, we're near the count. I think that I preferred Cities and Knights to base Catan in 9 out of 10 ways, and the one way that I did not was that the length was increased a little bit too much. Now, I think some of this is just us floundering in a game and not knowing how to like get our economies going, but it just sort of felt like we couldn't get it moving, and then we got it moving, and like the second half of the game was like quite enjoyable. And Christina, I think, of all of us, was actually like surprised and enjoyed it. I think that because we've done a board game podcast for hundreds of episodes, it's sort of like we've moved past Catan, but that did sort of lead to the question, has anything done it better since? Which is what we're going to get to on the other side of this. Neon, was there any last takes you had on Catan Cities and Knights? I am glad that I have played it. I am going to hold on to this, but I do think that I would probably prefer base, just from like it's not half as long, but it's like nearly half as long.
Yeah, I think that's where part of this is going to be hard to say, because I've not played base in a very long time properly. Right?
Yes,
so
of
like,
course.
I would have to like compare it to my memory of it and like how I imagine it plays without the expansion. And I still think I sort of net out on, I don't think that what Cities and Knights added was worth the trade-off in weight and length. Not that it makes it substantially heavier at all, to be honest, but like there's something there. It adds a little bit more grit to the game, and it makes it longer. And I still think that 90% of what I enjoyed about it would be in base Catan. So yeah, I think part of that is that, I didn't really feel like I engaged with the knights all that much. And the whole tech tree style of the cities, which gets added, it felt interesting early on, but I started to get a little bit underwhelmed by it as the game progressed. So like neither of those elements felt like they added a lot to me. The barbarian like semi-co-op stuff, I always think that that's an interesting layer on a game, but yeah. I also didn't think that the game needed it. It felt pretty different, and like I said, I think I would have enjoyed base Catan like almost as much.
Yeah. No, it just changed that sort of like frolicking, I'm gonna expand now, and all of a sudden it's like, we're 3 turns away from barbarians. Get your knights now or get
Yeah, exactly. It really just changes, like, it adds these tension points to the game that are interesting. And I generally like that stuff, to be honest. But yeah, I was overall pleasantly surprised by like how much I enjoyed it, even if it did go quite long because of the expansion. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that there was a little bit of apprehension, or a little bit of like, I've always wanted to play this, but are we actually going to have fun doing this, hundreds of board games later? It was a totally fun time. Looking at a Catan board is like deeply, deeply nostalgic for me. Like I have an image of it here up on the left, and it's like, it's pretty hard to like extricate that sort of feeling from I don't know. It's like that sort of coziness. It's all there for me in Catan. So I was excited to have played Cities and Knights, crossed that off the bucket list. Finished all the P.T. Anderson films. Listen, I haven't played Traders and Barbarians, but I don't know that that's fitting into like the quintessential must-try thing, and I have played Seafarers. But there is just that little part of me that's like, oh, should I have gotten Seafarers too? That box, brilliant. It's beautiful. Again, these are review copies. You've probably played Catan if you listen to this podcast, but maybe not. It's pretty interesting, and it does lead to our discussion of has anything done it better since. But before we do that, look, there's two but before we do that's in this episode. Think about that. Mark is going to get a little bit darker.
That's right.
Than Infamous Traffic.
That's right. Before I start getting dark, a bright note here. I just wanted to shout out patron Matt, who goes by Dinger Ate My Baby on our Discord. He wrote me asking me things to do in Vegas. He was going to be here for a little while, and our schedules lined up and got a chance to play some games with him at my place. And had a lovely time. He was a fantastic guy, which is not surprising considering he's a patron of ours, but fantastic time. We got a chance to play Mr. Diamond, a classic.
Oh my God.
A BGB classic. I got a chance to play my first time playing Cusco, which is the reimagining or the latest edition of Java, one of the Kramer and Kiesling Masks trilogy. So I got a chance to play that and played a fantastic game. And it just reminded me why this is such a good game of the Estates. My God, that game's so good. That game is so good. But yeah, just want to say thanks, Matt. The other thing I want to say is you're mentioning that Infamous Traffic, which I promised to get to very, very quickly, has a great title. You talked about completing like the P.T. Anderson movies. I just heard and been looking into getting into Italian giallo movies. Have you guys heard of giallo movies?
No.
This is like a type of movie that was popular in Italian cinema in the 70s that was like sort of the precursor to like slasher movies that I've heard are sort of an interesting genre. And I've wanted to start dipping my toe into potentially watching them, although I can hear that they can be sort of difficult. But the reason I bring it up is they are also very, very well known for their very elaborate titles. You mentioned Infamous Traffic being a great title. So I just wanted to read a couple of these giallo movie titles. So The Red Queen Kills 7 Times. Don't Torture a Duckling. Death Walks on High Heels, and my favorite, Your Vice is a Locked Room and Only I Have the Key. These are all titles of Italian giallo movies, so I thought they were fantastic. Anyhow, Infamous Traffic. So after an 8-year break between plays for me, I finally got a chance to play Infamous Traffic again by Cole Worley and published by Hollandspiel. Worley is obviously the designer behind a bunch of, I think it's fair to call them modern classics like Root, John Company, and John Company Second Edition, PAX Premier. Although I don't know if PAX Premier necessarily would rise to what you would call a modern classic. Maybe not even John Company, but definitely Roots. Anyway, and as I said, Infamous Traffic published by Hollandspiel back in 2016. I think my play of it was 2017, so been a while. When I was considering discussing this game in the upfront here, I was initially concerned that I'd reviewed it earlier in the history of the show, so I actually looked it up on our wiki at boardgamebarrage.com/wiki, and sure enough, there were 4 instances where we brought the game up. So I went back and listened to them. 2 of them are Kellen putting it on his list of games he wanted to try but never has. And no surprise, He still has not done so. And the other two mentions were not reviews of the game, so I'm clear to talk about it. And the reason I bring it up, this quick scans I did of our games mentions in the episodes, was there was one constant in all the mentions, and that was my use of the word opaque or opacity in describing an Infamous Traffic. I heard it so often in these little snippets that I was hearing that I was actually pretty annoyed with myself for saying it over and over again. So anyway, I came away from this latest play that I'm going to talk about of Infamous Traffic, both agreeing and disagreeing with the use of that term, which I promise not to use at all in this description. But anyway, in Infamous Traffic, you play as a member of the British business class trying to earn tokens of nobility, which are basically hats. So hats are sort of the victory points. It sort of echoes to John Company where you're trying to get signs of nobility. Anyway, you're trying to earn these tokens of nobility because historically the East Indian Trading Company has lost their monopoly on trading. So you're trying to jump in there and get ahead by, in this case, selling opium to the Chinese. This will again sound a lot like the tone of the aforementioned John Company. And there is a lot of that kind of sarcastic, jaded, in an illustrative, instructional, educational way, that view of the period of history in both games, both John Company and this one, for sure. Playing Infamous Traffic did definitely get me interested in reading up on the opium trade and the opium wars, which is a period of time I have very little knowledge of, but definitely piqued my interest. Anyway, back to the game itself. I guess a good way to keep this comparison going with John Company is to say that in a lot of ways, Infamous Traffic, while sharing the same tone again as John Company, plays much, much differently. I should also say here, though, that I guess I might be even wrong about this, given that my experience with John Company is exclusively with the first edition. But if I'm wrong about how complex John Company second edition is, I think my description will still make sense. The chief difference being that an Infamous Traffic is a much, much simpler, much quicker game than John Company. The box says 45 to 90 minutes. And while our game took about 2 hours, I think that was predominantly due to our table trying to collectively, and we did talk about what we could even do on our turn a couple of times as a table, but us trying to understand how pulling the different levers and gears of this game worked. I don't doubt that if I played this again with people who had also played it before, that we could very, very easily get the game done in under 90 minutes, which I don't think is possible with John Company. But again, I could be wrong. I think I have a tendency to get a little too bogged down in these upfronts and explaining how a game works, explaining like all the rules. But with an Infamous Traffic, I think that is even more futile than usual. I will say that on your turn, you're simply going to take one action before your turn moves to the next player. So on your turn, all you're doing is one thing. And the menu of the actions that you can do is quite limited. You can invest in an enterprise and a business venture, which basically means readying one of your business interests, like one of the tokens that represent your businesses. So that's one thing you can do. The other thing is placing one of the businesses on the board, moving it from your supply to the board. You can take what's called a conspiracy action, which means picking one of a number of like piles of tokens and then just using them for whatever their different purposes are. You can lower your prices, which means going to one of your businesses and lowering the prices that you're charging so that you can either make money in a region that doesn't have very much money, or preventing other players from coming in with the same type of business and undercutting you, which is a big thing that you can do in the game, like swooping in and knocking somebody else because you're charging less. And the last thing you can do is pass. Those are the 5 things you do. You do one of them per turn and it just goes on and on. And so the options are, again, simple and fast, but the trying to understand the ramifications of what everything means is a lot more difficult. But strangely, and again, this game has a lot of buts in it when you're thinking about it, but strangely, it's not difficult in a way that meant the game often grinds to a halt as players calculate. It's very clear what you can do on your turn. And again, the actions are very simple and straightforward. And we did definitely have situations where people were taking longer on their turns to calculate what things could do. But there are so many like unusual for board game levers that the ramifications of what you didn't seem to hit us until like many turns in the future. So the calculation, you could calculate to some extent, but like just this game is so unusual that it was hard for us to figure out, 3 turns down the line, doing that means something else is going to happen. That was hard for us to get. And again, that unusual for board game thing I just talked about feels like such a hallmark of Whirly Designs. And I think Infamous Traffic is perhaps second only to John Company in its unusualness relative to the rest of the board game world. This game won't feel like anything else you've played. And if you're a fan of Whirly, and especially John Company, and want that same strange, interesting vibe, only faster, I think Infamous Traffic is a very easy recommendation on that front. For me, while it was super interesting, it didn't feel like enough of a quote unquote game for me, much in the same way that John Company didn't. The competitive part of gaming is, as I've said multiple times on the show, a big part of the enjoyment for me of playing board games. And that doesn't necessarily seem like the biggest focus of this game's design, I don't think. There are certainly bits of luck, for example, that can disrupt your plans, and it sort of like swoops in out of nowhere. I guess you could do some mitigation, but it just seemed very punitive and sort of random in some situations, in my opinion. And so as our game night was breaking up, and, this was the last game of the night and people were heading out to go home, I decided to add this game to my BGG 4 trade list. I clicked 4 trade and added it to that. But then, and maybe echoing the sort of twisty, not quite this, not quite that nature of this game, I found myself thinking about it a ton the next day. And then I removed it from my 4 trade list. And then I realized, actually, I do want to have it up for trade. So I added it back on. So this is currently on my 4 trade list. In the end, I think that's right for me. I think that this is such an interesting game. I absolutely love the freshness and the inventiveness of Whirly Designs, and this one in particular. And perhaps if I knew I was going to play this more, and I'd be confident that I'd get to a place where I felt like that competitive aspect to what I love about board games could be satisfied because I understood the game well enough, then maybe I would feel good about keeping it. But I just don't think I'll be able to get the game enough time to get there. But I think Whirly fans or fans of games that are, I don't know, works of art sort of in a way, or social commentary, will really, really like this. I think, again, John Company fans, it's a good barometer for whether or not you'll like Infamous Traffic.
But it's like, I really like John Company, but if it was half as long. And this sounds like, I've just been reading some reviews of this.
Yeah.
I actually think I could like this.
Yeah. I think there's a chance, because I do remember you liking John Company. I'm sure in general you'd like games that are shorter than longer. And this felt like it to me. This felt like John Company in half the time. Again, I've only played the original John Company, the first edition, a couple times, but this had the same vibe to it for sure. Maybe I'll just send it to you instead of trading it.
That would be an expensive gift. This looks like, I was just looking at if I could acquire it. It's like made of like paper, right?
It is
all
made
board
of paper,
games are made of paper. But
yeah, I'm an old hand at the packaging game, so I will send it to you tonight. Because I'm not going to play it
tonight at 10 p.m. at night.
Actually, one of the great things about living in Vegas, I mean, great for me, great for nobody else, is that we actually have a USPS that is open till 9. Which I love. I have that's one of my weird, like, things I love about Vegas is that they have a post office that's open until 9 o'clock. But so I missed it. I missed it by an hour.
This little fun factoid, right, Mark, feels like, when you're in your like 70s or whatever, and people are like, what do you like about Vegas? And like the third thing on your list is like, plus we have a post office that's open until 9 p.m.
Yeah.
And you're like really braggadocious about it. You know what
I
mean?
am unusually braggadocious about that. I will definitely admit that.
That's funny. That is cute. I would love to play this. I would love to play it with you. I think that's the hard part here, but you are in Vegas to take advantage of that later hours at the USPS.
That is Infamous Traffic by Cole Worley and published by Hollandspiel, although I know that Hollandspiel, Amabel Holland, relinquished the rights to the game so that Worley could do his own version of it. So I think that's coming out from Worley Geeks sometime in the future. I don't think there's anything set in stone yet, but I'm sure that's coming up.
All right, let us jump right into the feature topics of this episode, which, as we said, was inspired by our recent play of Catan. It's sort of open-ended, but I was posing the question to Neelan because this Catan is rooted in my childhood and is rooted in the evolution of modern board gaming. I said, has anything... No, I don't know that I said it because Neelan articulated it later. I said it dumber than this, but Neelan gave me the words. He inspired my wings. Has anything done it better since? And I think that's the simple start. So right now, Mark and Neelan, I want you to try to tell me a game that has out-Catan because, we're supposed to be over it. We're board gamers. We have hundreds of board games. Catan was fired a long time ago. Has anything done it better since?
I will say that I struggled to think of anything, and then I ended up trying to search other people's opinion on the same
Cheater.
thing. Well, so I want to let Mark sort of
Confess
give his take
your
first
sins.
before I consult the internet, as it were.
It's hard for me to think of, partially because I did not play Catan very much. I mean, I've played it, I think, 4 or 5 times in my life, and it was never one of my favorite games. So I don't have that strong of a memory of it or a feeling for it. But I'm thinking of trading games with that kind of trading. The only thing that jumps to my head, this probably doesn't answer the question, but like Bonanza would be a game like that. But it does not,
Sure.
It's not replacing Catan though. It's not the same sort of thing.
Yeah, I think what was interesting about where I was trying to go in my head with this is kind of the same thing. It's like you try to think of trading games first, but then as I was playing Catan, I was like, I don't think that the trading is the thing that I really would want to recapture here because there are plenty of other great trading games. But it's specifically that little thing that very pleasant. You're kind of just gathering resources and building up a thing and trying to do it better than other players, but in a very, very simple context. The weight here is the important sell for me, right? There are obviously that style of Eurogame, get resources, build infrastructure is very well represented, but not typically at this weight and with this speed.
Yeah, and I mean, breaking down what is quintessential Catan is super hard. But
Sure.
I think there's a shared board, right? So there's elements of blocking. There is super light, it's not 4X, but you do feel like you're building out your own little civilization, and you are making decisions to try to get better odds in this dice game that is happening, right? And there's sort of random resource generation, but it's chosen by you, and you could have picked the perfect spot, and you could have just beaten Neelan there. And so there's like a coziness that I've already sort of talked about that exists there. But it's also not, a 2.5 hour game.
Yeah.
It is a sub 2 hour experience. And I'm not convinced. And again, each game is a different concoction of other games. But I think that you could pick a mechanic and fight against it. Has anything got a better sense? I guess the sort of root of this question, right? And we can keep going on the mechanics, is like, is Catan popular because it was very good at the time that it came out, and its popularity has just stayed, since 1995, meteoric rise? Or is Catan popular because like literally it's still no one has beaten it, which I find like such an interesting idea, because there are thousands of board games that have come out, and yet I can't think of anything that I would just be like, yeah, this is basically Catan, but I prefer this.
And I will say, when Kellen asked the question, I rejected the notion completely initially. Like, I was like, there is definitely something, like, for that exact same reason. There are thousands of games. There is something that is doing the same thing. And I was actually genuinely surprised that we couldn't think of one. And also, any of the examples we found online of people saying the same thing, in my opinion, were not really good answers. For example, one that comes up a lot is Concordia, but I think that Concordia is quite a different game.
Yeah, it's way too heavy to feel like.
Yeah, it's certainly much heavier. I did think of one a little bit independently. I don't think it's exactly right, but Rise of Tribes strikes me as like very light, sub 1 hour, 4X adjacent. I just don't remember like loving it, but I remember liking it enough to think like, there's something here that might be worth going back to. Do you remember playing that, Kellen?
I do. We had a really good play of this.
Yeah.
And it's also hexagons. Which, to replace Catan, you must have hexagons.
And it is more 4X-y. That is definitely the pitch of Rise of Tribes. But like, I don't know. I don't know if it's exactly right.
No, yeah. And I think often, when people pose this question, I think Concordia is the answer. It's like, oh, I've got a friend hooked on Catan. What could I get them hooked on next? And like, maybe you could get them to Concordia. But like, where I'm at is like, the weight of Catan actually led for a very nice, but still fun gaming session. Now, again, we had Cities and Nights in there. I feel like it was a little long, and I did like the extra mechanisms of Cities and Nights. So I'm a little bit worried that base Catan, we would just be like, we're not really going to do this. We have thousands of other options. I think that the one that kept coming to my brain, because one of the major things in Catan is the space base of it all, which is like making your bets for numbers to be rolled, and that sort of random resource generation. Actually, this is the perfect time to use that stupid British phrase. What is it again, Neil?
Swings and roundabouts.
Swings and roundabouts, right? On the dice?
Yeah, sure. I'll give it to you.
Wait.
No.
Like
that's it.
Sometimes you get cheap,
you're up, sometimes you're down.
You're down. Swings and roundabouts.
Yeah, there it is.
It's perfect. So Space Base really gives you that feeling of like, okay, like it was like Neelan. He really cared about fours in our game of
typical Neelan.
Catan. Yeah, and it's like Neelan, fours don't get rolled very often, but every time it did, he was getting paid out quite handsomely, and he thought he was just the belle of the ball, the smartest man in the island. And that feeling is replicated in Space Base. Space Base feels a little messy, though. I don't know. I want to like Space Base.
What about Machi Koro? Sort of like Space Base light and like cozy feeling a little bit. Although I think it's a worse game than Space Base. It does feel like more approachable and a little cozier. Even the artwork feels cozier.
And you feel like you're building something more in Space Base, I would say. Whether that's just like literally the theme. I agree. I think Machi Koro is an excellent suggestion. I don't think it gives me the same feeling of I'm playing like a board game.
Yeah.
Again, like I still have this picture of Catan from the 6th edition up on the left here, and it's just like, and again, this could just be nostalgia, right? And, the Discord is like, oh, Kellen, nostalgia. Has anyone done a better sense? Yes, hundreds of times, over and over again. But I'm not sure. And even I actually think, and this again goes back to the nostalgia, so maybe I'm outing myself here. Even some of my love of Archipelago is based on the fact that it is like a hexagon board and you're sort of exploring out, and it just has this like, I mean, it's way crazier than Catan, but it does have something underlying there that's not Catan.
Yeah.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think it actually like puts into perspective like how much you love Archipelago, because it almost feels like, hey, what if we took Catan as like a base, like more or less, and then built a much crazier game out of like the bones of it? That makes a lot of sense to me.
And it's hard because like I would never say that I am like a Catan guy, you know what I mean? Or that I even have, you know, like I don't have my old copy of Catan anymore. But it's like, it's not like in the way that I like Pokemon, let's say. But for some reason, I feel like I just have this like nostalgia. And I'm not convinced that has anything done a better since. I'm not convinced. And neither of you have convinced me. But we did want to open it up. Do either of you has anyone done it better since for the group? Has anything, has anyone, has anybody done it better since?
I think the one that I perpetually like second guess myself on is Dominion. You know, like,
sure.
Kind of as a second obvious example as far as like classics that like really established themselves at an early time in board games. But like, I would say that for myself personally, Dominion is not my favorite deck building game anymore. But like the fact that it's even in the conversation, and the games I would say are better than it for my tastes are not pure deck builders, kind of feels like a little bit of a cheat. It's hard to argue the games I would say that like, hey, this game is 100% built around just, hey, build a deck, play cards, that are better than Dominion. I think some of them would have to get kind of edge casey for me. Like Aeon's End, you know, which is effectively like a cooperative style Dominion, which I do think improves some aspects of that deck building element. I do think that there are a lot of deck builders, you know, like I said, like Dune Imperium, stuff like Quest for Eldorado, Eternals Chronicles of the Throne, which I'd much rather play, but there is still something about that like pure deck building feel that I don't know that other deck builders have replicated as well as Dominion has.
Yeah. So then the question, Mark, and I have an answer for this, maybe, but is there a better pure deck builder than Dominion? Has anyone done a better since? In the words of my immortal friend Neelan.
I don't know if I'm qualified so much to answer this because
You're not. You never are.
I was not as heavy into Dominion as I think a lot of people were at the time, and so I didn't really go down the deck building rabbit hole until they got into like the hybrids. So in terms of pure deck builders, I don't know. I don't know if I can think one that does it better, but I wonder.
I know. For example, like Star Realms would be a lot of people's answer. Right?
Sure.
Yeah. And that was the one that I would bring up. I think there's an even better version though, right? Which is something. I mean,
Shards
like,
is that the one you're thinking?
Yeah. Like
that would probably be, if I were to pick a pure card-based deck builder, that would probably be my answer. But that's like 3 iterations, you know. Down the line.
Star Realms has like, they're still making Star Realms, but I think Star Realms.
No, what I mean is it's like you have, you know, Ascension, Star Realms, and then Shards of Infinity.
Yes.
Like you have to like take a bunch of leaps to get
totally
Shards of Infinity.
And as a base system, like deck building is Dominion. I don't know. And it's crazy how like the structure of 2 hands of 5 cards, so much of the structure of Dominion is just like wholesale, like replicated in almost every deck builder. Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But then if you're willing to add other mechanisms, like I would say, yes, there are better games. And Dominion is also a hard one unless you're doing the Neelan principle of Dominion is every copy of Dominion, exactly. Which includes like thousands of cards and different options.
Yeah, I know that this is not a popular opinion. I still think the base game of Dominion is incredibly excellent. I don't necessarily need the expansions to fuel my love of Dominion.
Sure. No, I listen, I just got rid of Dominion and have reacquired Dominion and have a couple of expansions I've never played. I have sort of this like, maybe the apocalypse happens and Christina and I have like a couple Dominion expansions, you know, and wine and then our inevitable deaths to look forward to at some point in the future.
Have they ever made a Dominion big box that holds every expansion?
No, I don't even think it'd be possible.
I mean, that'd be impossible.
Well, yeah, well, I think actually, I'm curious how much just the cards, how much would all the expansions weigh? And I'm not convinced you could put that in one box. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think people have come up with really elaborate like binder solutions, like like Because you also, some people just put them in a giant pile of their 10 cards because, like, it doesn't matter if you don't need, like, ordered sets unless you care about getting away from the trash that is alchemy. Mark, you have no nostalgia. You're a man of the now. You know what I mean?
I live in the now. I live in the present. I was actually trying to think of the inverse here. A game that would be contentious with us to discuss. So I'm going to throw out there that a game that I think has been done better, but maybe you wouldn't argue that it has. Diplomacy.
Yeah.
What do you think about Diplomacy?
Has anyone done it better since?
I just recently played a game of Dune.
Yeah.
The original Dune, the new version of the original Dune, the latest release. And that felt like it had a lot of the negotiation from Diplomacy, but done in a more palatable way. And I think this sort of breaks down when you're talking about, like, has anybody done it more purely?
Yeah,
I think obviously, like, yeah.
I mean, and I think that like you have to fudge this just a smidgen. Yeah, I was just looking up like when these games came out, because if the question is, has anyone done it better since, you're talking about the period from 1959 to 1979
to the present
when Dune came out.
Sure.
And did it?
Yeah, we're still talking about
because you've got the Game of Thrones like games.
Yeah,
that is not Diplomacy. There's a lot like in the Imperial 2030.
Imperial that would have been my pick.
And even I guess Cosmic Encounter has gone too far. Like it's like just pure negotiation games. I think Diplomacy is basically two parts, which is like a risk takeover. Right. And then it's also just like a negotiation simulator. And then the other thing about Diplomacy, right, that is interesting is that it's also like that system of turning in your orders and then they all resolve simultaneously is quite novel. At least I don't know that I've ever played a game that does that in that way. But I would be happy for some, like if Dominion and Catan, I would say that of these three here, Diplomacy is the one that, yes, people have done it better since. Because I also think, again, like you have to have 7 players. It's not as good without 7 players. Like, come on, bro. Like, even like Battle for Rokugan, right, has like some distillation of some of these kind of like fun backstabby, but it doesn't take 12 hours and you don't need 7 exact people. And the person playing Italy has to team up with everybody or they're going to lose the game. Yeah. It's sort of like,
even Game of Thrones, which is a pretty pure negotiation game, does make allowances for fewer players if you have certain expansions or whatever, and is a little bit shorter. So, yeah.
But it is an interesting one because it's basically like if the answer to this topic is like every game is special, bro, and like you could never replicate its like 4 ingenious features, like I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. Well, I guess the opposite end of that is like games that have like just completely replaced other games or fired other games, which happens, right?
Yeah,
definitely.
Because if we move over to like Movie Land. Obviously, Joker replaced Taxi Driver, the movie.
Everyone says
everyone knows that, and
universal acceptance.
Made a beautiful sequel, Joker 2, the musical. You know what I'm saying?
I wonder if I should beep that.
The best Marvel film we've had in the last 10 years.
Oh my god! You get so many people angry at you.
And that is going to do it for our episode today. I hope this makes you look back at your past and say, "Has anything done it better?" Since I did it back then. Thank you so much to Heart Society Music for their song What's on Your Mind came from their album Wake the Queens. You can't find them on the internet because they are no longer a band. You can find us at boardgamebarrage.com. You can email us at boardgamebarrage@gmail.com. You can reach out to us on Discord. You can reach out to us on Facebook. You can reach out to us on X, though I don't know that I'd recommend going there in the current environment. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Thank you so much to our patrons. Thank you so much. Thank you, and good night.
Bye-bye.
We will always be a band.
That's right. Yeah. I don't know. Who's what in the band?
Oh, God.
Yeah, not who's Ringo Starr. I don't care.
No,
okay,
yeah.
No more who's
I'm
Ringo
George
Starr.
Harrison. Kellen is
Oh, God. Turn it off. End the episode. And scene. Hello, this is Kellen on microphone number 1. What is the new British phrase I learned?
Hello. Swings and roundabouts.
Swings and roundabouts. Do we know what it comes from?
It just
Sounds
feels
like a
one of
sports
those,
reference.
I don't think so.
It's more about
It's like a traffic
the
thing.
rides at a playground. It's like sometimes you're on the swings, sometimes you're on the roundabouts.
Yeah.
We all know which one we like more than the other. I don't know. It feels like one of those things that just came out of nothing in particular.
It's basically like we could go that way, we could go this way. It doesn't matter.
It's more like
Doesn't matter.
you
It
win some, you
originated-
lose some.
It originated
You know,
from the
it's-
idea that at a fairground, a ride like swings might be losing money, while a ride like roundabout might be making
Yeah.
money, thus balancing out the financial picture.
Yeah, you're up on one, you're down on the other,
Yeah.
and it all balances out.
It means a situation that has as many advantages as disadvantages, or that gains and losses are offsetting each other. So, yeah, little this, little that, or it all evens out in the end sort of thing.
Win some, lose some?
Yeah.
Win some, lose some. Yeah.
But they call
Oh,
it
but
swing.
But it's
Round
more
is
specific.
smart.
It's more specifically like the net effect is we're breaking even.
What about 6 of one and half dozen of the other?
Well, that's kind of more like these things are
the
the
same.
same but different.
Yeah. So,
And
yeah,
this is some goes up, some goes down.
Yeah, this
swings
is
and
saying
roundabouts.
like it's got good stuff, it's got bad stuff, and
Kinda like-
on the
it all
whole,
comes out in the
we're-
wash. It all comes out.
Yeah, it all comes out.
Yeah,
exactly.
or
Yeah.
I went gambling this weekend and made $20, but I went gambling last weekend and lost $50. Swings and roundabouts.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah, I think so.
You can use either of those.
I
You can
usually
use either of
hear it
those.
in the context of like opinions more than anything. Like it's like,
but how is it used in the context of opinions when it's like two things?
Yeah, that
well,
could do
it's
that, we
kind
could
of
do
like
this.
so like a very simple
Moss or
example would be-
Manos, more or less.
So it's like, well, I saw Inherent Vice, loved the direction, hated the acting, swings and roundabouts.
it all evens out.
It's like this was good, but this was bad, and the overall thing. Was
I'm
like,
gonna
it was
butcher
fine.
this so hard when I use it at work. People are gonna be like, "What are you talking about?" All right, let me just get one last thing here, then we will clap. Has anything done it better since? Okay, here we go. You ready?